You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Radio Free Larry.
All right, here we go again. All right. So God was trying a few things, such as having me not broadcast to see if they would create a motivation to do what they say I should be doing instead of what I'm doing. Not at all. If you stop doing something, then they actually feel like they're more powerful in an anti-powerful way, of course, and then they attack harder. Evidence my recent injury. So again, they lie about everything. They've lied to their bosses, and they're just killing people because they're psychotic murderers, not the people they investigate generally, although there are psychotic murderers that they do investigate and arrest to cover their criminal enterprise. You wouldn't keep them around long if they actually merely psychologically operated and psychologically tortured people into crime and didn't actually investigate any real criminals. So that's occurring all across the nation, willy-nilly as they desire to do it, because they will extort anybody in any community using extreme levels of psychological warfare. Combat levels, CIA levels, including CIA people, and the CIA network that was developed by our nation using that $1 trillion technology and those $1 trillion in budgeting over the years. Remember, a year's budget is only a year's budget. To build the CIA criminal enterprise, the nation had to spend trillions and trillions of dollars over decades. Now, within that criminal enterprise is the real CIA. However, how effective are they actually? Not really at all. Pretty much useless, because they've gone after other things other than what they were supposed to be doing. So again, the sun did touch in yesterday, I imagine. I didn't necessarily see him 100%, just kind of a vision of it. Although last night I went to sleep in a certain way that aided in the healing. I was out of alignment, and the inflammation is probably causing that, because it's pulling me off to one side, and it was causing a lot of what they call referred issues, where the neurology was pinking other places. So I looked at this video yesterday, and it told me the exercises I'm supposed to do, but you have to see a doctor to tell you which direction you have to do the exercise. When I went to sleep, I slept in this position, and when I woke up, I noticed that it was all gone. And I'm like, or a majority of it, I'm thinking, I must have engaged in that exercise in the right direction, because the way my knee was going was one of the exercises. And, it wasn't comfortable when I woke up. I could feel, a little bit of inflammation, but as soon as I moved and got moving, it kind of disappeared. And then I noticed all that peripheral stuff was disappearing. So again, combination of things such as Motrin. I probably should have got on Motrin right away at a sizable dose, but, not a medical dose, but an over-the-counter dose. And didn't do that. That's part of the curse, to get to the fix of it. But if I remember correctly, when it initially happened, it didn't feel that inflamed, although I could feel something happened. So one of the byproducts of healing is inflammation. So as it healed more and more and more, I inflamed more and more and more. And then at a certain point, you have to take the Motrin to calm it down so it can heal even faster, or at least at the level it was initially healing. So that's where I am. Looks like I'm going to have a vehicle at some point. Been a long time looking for one. Finally God kind of just in one day moved it. Not exactly what I wanted, but it'll be what it'll be. Going to work for what I need now. And working on outfitting it with some accessories now. We'll be able to drive up the road comfortably with a sizable amount of my belongings and be wherever God tells me to be. And at this point, it appears that it's going to be Lubbock, but I don't know until the day I go. So the deep state would say, well, you shouldn't tell people where you're going, and, that way they wouldn't know. And I'm like, you know where I'm going. It's better that I tell everybody where I'm going. That way anybody that's honest has an opportunity to make sure you don't do your corrupt things. But, like I said, the nation has fallen. There's nothing left. If you as an individual is doing something right, that doesn't mean that it's moving in the right direction to begin with. Let be that the nation has a national effort of goodness. Communism is in our government. Liberalism is not communism. Communism can be liberal or conservative. The Soviet Union was conservative, yet they manipulated liberals. However, if you look at the video created by Mr. Griffin or narrated by Mr. Griffin, the subversion factor, the last part of the instruction from the Kremlin was to put people in ultra-conservative and conservative positions. They won't be looked for there. And what better place to put that than law enforcement? Because it tends to be conservative. Intelligence, conservative. Military, moving liberal, but was at one time conservative. And in reality, liberal, if you're a libertarian, doesn't conflict with conservative. It's the socialist part of it, but yet all conservatives have engaged in a certain level of socialism within the United States. And why does that happen? Conservatism only works when people are honest. And that takes a large percentage of the community to be honest for conservatism to work. Otherwise, it's just communism. Not just at that. Government oppression occurs in many ways. Racism is an element of the government oppression. However, you can't beat it by simply taking on racism, because then that becomes part of how they oppress people, and you see that out there. I'm liberating myself, therefore I get to oppress you. I'm protecting the community, therefore I get to oppress you. You see, it came from the deep state government first, and now the people are doing the same thing. And the deep state's trying to bank on it, but it's not actually working. The president lost his connection with the people because he took on the deep state mentality. And that means that there's a group of people within the United States that we just write off, that they're worthless. And they are. It's a deep state. But they're all over his executive branch. It's very difficult to root them out because they won't investigate themselves. Once upon a time, it wasn't so big, so that investigation was better. So the sun did stop by, and there was a modicum of healing. And the first time I saw that level of healing, I wouldn't say a modicum, it was a lot of healing that was done last night. I slept better than I had in even the weeks leading up to the injury. I can now breathe in my apartment without the humidity. I can have a normal level of humidity, which may have been part of what inflamed everything to begin with. because when you're having additional humidity, you have additional mold, you also have additional inflammation, that kind of thing. So it's hope that this heals. Last time I had something major, it was much worse than this. And I healed to the point in 6 months that I was riding up and down hills in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Well, actually, first Espanola and then Santa Fe, but within a month or two later. So that's, a little bit younger, but, not much. And I'm not looking to do that necessarily. So again, I'm trying to figure out if I want to put a luggage rack on top of my vehicle so that I'll have extra space. Probably will. I'm just wondering if I'll be able to access it. I could do it with light stuff. I could probably climb a step ladder. No problem. I have a short one somewhere. I don't know if it's here or in my storage. And I'll be able to load up on top of the vehicle. So again, it's an interesting vehicle, not exactly what I wanted. Ended up probably overprotecting it with a warranty. But because without it, my payment would have been perfect where I wanted it. But then again, I saved $40 on my insurance. That was real nice. Geico did me well. I actually have it overinsured probably. But that's okay. And I have the first time that I've ever paid 6 months up front and got that discount. So again, even though I spent on one hand, it all came back to me somewhere else. Because my own insurance was like extremely high. When I went back to my insurance company and tried to get it insured, at first I just figured, I messed up. I bought a vehicle that's expensive to insure. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was actually quite economical to insure. It was just that my insurance company was rigged somehow. And for all I know, don't put this beyond the possibility. Somebody could have hacked their computers to shoot an inferior rate. Because when I went to Progressive, the first time I got a different rate. I got a good rate, then I got a bad rate, and it had code in there from when they were doing their deep state stuff. And I'm like, did somebody hack this? Because my rate just went to a rate similar to my first insurance company after I gotten like half the rate. That was a big difference. Like $190 a month. And I ended up with like $80 a month. 80 to 90. And I may have been able to get that 190 down to about 150 or something, but I saved that $50 anyway. And I got great coverage. I mean, I have 2 years and I think 20,000 miles or something like that on my, or 25,000 miles, something like that on my Nissan warranty. Then on top of that, I have a 5-year warranty that even makes me keys and all that stuff. So if I lose a key, and that might be for protection never to lose my key. However, calculated what I spent on my Mini Cooper, and granted I might not have to fix anything on this, but what I spent on my Mini Cooper would have definitely paid for that. And now that I think about it, I know somebody who had a Nissan Versa, and they had to fix their fuel pump, and it was a crazy price. So again, it'll if I got to put a fuel pump in it, I mean that's when you go to the dealer, it's expensive. So again, that protection's nice, and just going to focus on paying it off, saving up a bunch of money to pay it off as fast as I can. I don't know about the future if I were to go to Lubbock. It looks like and feels like a good place, but so did this place. So we'll see. Getting a little bit drier digs will help me. I think that's what started in Oklahoma. It was wet and moldy. And then when I came here, it got worse. And over time, I started degrading, but there was not much I could do. If you remember, right before COVID hit, I was trying to get to physical rehabilitation. I don't know if I told you I was trying to get to therapy and stuff, but I started the massage. I was trying to get to some level of medical intervention as far as rehab to check me out and get me moving into exercise and flexibility and things such as that. Didn't manifest because of COVID-19, which shows you that which comes against me, that which comes against me is actually powering COVID-19. And that's why we threw it back at them. They didn't control who was affected by it and who wasn't affected by it. Return that control to God the best they can. And then it would stop because they would get all panicked that their people were dying, that their mother, that their father, that their brother was having issues. So my brother spent all that time with my mother, and he finally left. And somebody came in to my mother's room and aid, because that was the concern, was that we didn't expose her to too much of outside people. And, now that the testing is better in the nursing homes and everything, and the people that work in the nursing homes, he felt more comfortable. But the aide came in and she took her mask off. And my mother said, "No way, put that mask back on." My mother's a big watcher there. Because I don't know if anybody else would have had the gumption to do that. My mother was pretty resolute that woman wear a mask. And she goes, "You got to be kidding me." She goes, "No, I'm not. You're supposed to wear that mask." But she tried to even muscle my mother back. In reality, if my mother wanted to, she'd probably get her fired. Maybe even, credentials taken. So my brother leaves there, and the first day, my arm hit the mute button there. The first day, his son wants to go to New Jersey, the beach, the shore, and to meet his friends. My brother's thinking, okay, this kid's going to come back to my house. This is not good. But he did it for whatever reason. I guess his wife said, "Let's do this." And he had to go to a party. Now, he said it was pretty good. They all socially distanced and wore masks. But his wife's he's like, "I don't want to go there. I just spent, months in this room not coming out. And now I'm going to expose myself at a party." But his wife was adamant that he go, and they were people that they knew, and they had socially distanced, and they all wore masks and were social distance at the party, and was what it was. And now he's probably on like a 14-day watch for symptoms. But we're not that well protected necessarily. I mean, you go into stores, people have to wear masks, but like out front here, if I walk outside my front door, people are everywhere without masks. Now, the people that work here are doing better at wearing masks, so I'm glad to see that. But it's just not seeping in. And I think the Lubbock mayor, I think it was the mayor of Lubbock, he said, wear the damn thing, Not a big deal. Not a conspiracy. The conspiracy actually is to control you enough that you'll risk killing yourself for other people. Really, that's what's going on when you don't wear a mask. You're risking that spread to increase the level that there's more death. Now, have we beat it as far as maybe mutation and medical therapies? Yes, There's a great chance. Now, go back to the news article I posted. They say there was a weaker strain before it mutated more aggressive in Wuhan and then to Italy. That's very possible. I had something really, really bad, and I haven't anything like that in I don't know how long. I usually go through flus and viruses very quick. I don't think I ever had the flu, as far as I remember. But I'll get like a cold, a coronavirus thing. And then I'll be fine real quick, really. It doesn't really last. Most things that get me are allergies. But in February, I had a sore throat. And I haven't had a sore throat in I don't know how long. And if you remember, I was all messed up. And I went to the DMV, and I was like, well, did I tell the DMV everything right? And I went back and said, I'm not sure if I said the right thing. Am I okay? Did I say the right thing? And she said, you seem fine. And that was fine. But I was that dazed when I went into the DMV. So that may have been that weaker strain of COVID-19. Now, I don't know, because I've had, 2 or 3 instances where I could say possibly I had COVID-19. And then again, I guess you could have it 2 or 3 times possible. We're just not sure at this point. Now, as far as Dr. Fauci, which I used to call Fauci, for whatever reason, he is doing the right thing. You have to. They all talk about this fear. They're fearing you. They have to fear people, or it gets out of control. We might be lucky that it is not as aggressive because of several things, as I've said. Not only have we bought the time to come up with treatments and therapies that work, but we also have had it mutate here or there. So again, that study could reveal a few things. But I thank God for being able to sleep a good 8 hours, 8.5 hours, maybe even 9. So that worked well. I thank God for the vehicle. It is what it is. I had just planned I bought backpacks because I wasn't going to buy a vehicle. I was going to hunker down here for a couple more months and get a vehicle. But what happened was, the reason I thought of that also is I massaged myself, my neck and my ear tubes in that area. And for some reason, this thing cleared up and I was able to turn down the humidity and everything. That worked well. And the humidifiers are having an issue anyway, so I might end up returning those anyway. I'm not too pleased with those. They supposedly have these demineralization filters in them. Not doing that. And I had one before these. The output of these two is only a small amount greater than the one, but yet each one's listed as covering a larger square footage than that one was. So again, it told me like 600-700 square foot, and the other one was like 450. So these are really 450. So the advertisement was false as far as the rating, and then the mineralization is occurring. It's got white, and the other one didn't have that. I didn't have all that white stuff coming out of it, and the other one didn't even have filters. So go figure. So I hope this all heals and I feel better. And at a certain point, I'm going to get massages and I'm going to, be into all sorts of things. And last time I had to get juiced with an intense level. The doctor I went to in Naples, Florida, Dr. Burrell, or actually he's in Estero, he don't play around. When he juices you, he juices you. And he juiced me with an intense level of corticosteroid 8 years ago. And I feel like I feel on Motrin. So I still had stuff going on. But one thing I did notice when I was traveling to New Mexico from Florida, I turned north in Mississippi, somewhere like that, to get away. Maybe it was Alabama. Maybe it was Alabama. I can't remember. But I turned north and I took different roads. because I figured I'd get away from the ocean and see how I felt. And the further I got from the ocean and that humidity, the better I felt. So basically, I imagine even today, if I were to drive to Lubbock, my inflammation would cut down. That's another trick. So I'm going to go to, Lubbock's higher up in elevation. I really didn't want to go up in elevation, but that's about the closest place that's dry or drier. So no matter whether they have mold there or not, the dryness will cut down on the mold in the home to begin with and in the ambient air. The thing with Tyler, Texas, you could have a mold-free home, but it's still outside and in the air, and you can see it on things around here. So again, I didn't have the ability to connect dots, and that is what it is. Couldn't figure out what it was. But I got to rest and also move at the same time. If you rest too much, then you stiffen up, and it could just make it worse in the end. So you got to keep some level of flexibility moving, but yet not overdo it. I wasn't able to lay down, but for like 6 hours a day for the last week. That's how bad it was. But the day before it happened, boy, I was on top of the world. I felt great. And they probably noticed that. That's why they eye you. And then they curse you. Everybody picks up the curses harder because their emotions are so wrecked that you're not dying or isolating yourself in an apartment like the Unabomber did, like the other mass shooters did. They're sick. They know what they're doing. They're creating criminals. They're creating mass shooters. They're creating bombers. They say it, and then they want it to be. And they use extreme levels, intense levels of psychological torture and psychological warfare to create those people. If you don't go in the direction they want, you see what happens. You get harmed. Part of that is spiritual, part of that is psychological, and part of that is physical. They are the worst that have ever existed on this planet, and they will spend an eternity in hell. There's no way they can utter Jesus' name. There's just no way they'll hear them. And then if they go any other route, God has already condemned them. There's no other way than Jesus for a lot of people. Now, the condemnation doesn't necessarily start from God, but based upon agreements on the planet that there's a condemnation here. And then God, agrees to your agreements because he has to. God does not muscle you. But it's all based upon a system that you agree to. And then God tries to legitimize it by applying some level of justice to it. Again, sin, reaction, karma. So it is what it is. I turned the AC up real high, and I used to not be able to even turn the AC up at all. It was just, nothing was working. I don't know what it was. I guess, once they blew the wad on the injury, they didn't have a lot of anti-power left. And sometimes you actually have to get injured because you say, look, they can just stop because of A, B, or C. And until it happens, the system, Earth is a liar. Earth doesn't use vision. Earth is everything negative. Actually a form of hell. But they powered down somehow and a couple things corrected. So I turned the AC on yesterday at a high level. Felt great. And then everything went away, all the inflammation. And I'd only taken like one Motrin or something. So again, I got ice packs coming and things. I'll start icing it. And hopefully over time it diminishes and leaves. Like I said, it's not as bad as it was last. And I'll be using some additional supplements. When it's in the healing phase, you can only use so many supplements. But once it gets through the healing phase to a certain degree, you can then use some of the other supplements to increase the healing to the next level. Because what happens is if you use those supplements, it increases the inflammation, which is not good in that initial process. But once the inflammation is decreased below a certain level, you can then use the other things, and that'll go. I haven't had to use Motrin in years. I used to take like, one aspirin a day. Now, when I was in Oklahoma, I increased that to 2 or 3, but generally I take 1 aspirin a day. That was it. Once you get over 4 years old, they start recommending you take an aspirin anyway. So, wasn't an extra strength aspirin, wasn't anything fancy, just a basic aspirin. So I've been pretty lucky. It's been 8 years since I've needed anything, and I have ridden my bicycle and been to the gym and other things. So again, I imagine it's going to take a certain amount of time to get back in the groove with. Hopefully, there's no permanent damage. And chances are somebody that's healthy, there won't be. Where I was just a week and some change ago. So, again, looking forward to moving forward, but can't move forward until I heal a little bit. If there were no healing going on here, then I would most likely need to jump because of the inflammation from the humidity or whatever, the mold. But the healing is kind of taking over. My doctor, did well. I contacted my doctor and did well enough. And we both, and my neighbor had mentioned, we picked up on the idea that I'm somehow out of a line and it's grabbing a nerve. And I felt the one muscle had inflamed, the attachment point, and it had swollen. And when I got that swelling to reduce, then that grabbing of the nerve decreased. And at this point, a lot of the peripheral, when your nerve gets grabbed, you have weird feeling, different places where that nerve interacts with. That's diminished. So one of the things when I went to sleep, I was in a position that probably did that. I saw a video yesterday, and in that video, it said I needed to do some exercises. But first, you got to get analyzed by your doctor to tell you which direction and which leg to exercise and which, stretches and things like that. I'm thinking that's not going to work because I'm not going to a doctor right now. So I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I figured out my knee was in one of those positions of that exercise. And that had minimized that peripheral damage. And I think I told you that already once. That's just amazing. So again, as I've said before, sometimes Jesus comes around and you get that healing from somebody, and it isn't that person necessarily telling you to do something. It's unblinding the world and your even natural position so that there's no additional injury and the injury heals. Or you getting to a doctor that can heal you. There's a lot to healing. That doesn't mean you just faith heal and then you don't do anything further than that. Now, the one religion, what are they? Mary Baker Eddy, the Christian Science people, they believe that you don't go to doctors, and they generally, the people that are hardcore Christian Science people grow up in very healthy homes and live very healthy lives. They're generally not poor people. So there's probably a greater chance of not needing a doctor. However, Mary Baker Eddy is still a great person to listen to, no matter, I'm a person that believes there should be medical intervention if it's available, that thing, if it's necessary and it's available. However, I really enjoy Mary Baker Eddy. And if you're sitting with wondering what to do, go to the Christian Science people. There's a 24/7 channel where they play Mary Baker Eddy, narration of Mary Baker Eddy's writings. 24/7. It's great stuff. If you want to put your mind into a healing mind, that stuff is great. So again, it's never all or nothing. You don't have to write people off because they're another religion or they don't think like you. I've told you before, when I was in the military, I learned that even these people that we were going to throw out of the military could save a life and could save your life or even save my life. So again, the system wants you to be played. That's just a being the deep states. It blinds your mind unless you see anything at all. That be the real glorious gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a very simple thing. You just have to believe. You can read in there all these other things, but when it gets down to it, it says just believe that he came for you. That's it. He died for you. He came for you. He's here. Believe. And you know what? I think initially you just have to, yeah, right, because he wasn't even crucified yet. He said, just believe on me. Just believe God would send me for you to save you. That's all. But I would believe in the entire work. It's just easier that way. But you don't even have to go to church. He didn't tell you how to go to church. Now, when we had follow-on people, they made a whole system of requirements, but that's not for salvation. And in reality, as time went on, you can track Satan using that system against the Christian and against Jesus. So the system of religion is not the original gospel, the original thing that you do to get saved. Now, evidence of my salvation is what? It went from being sinless or sinning less to having a well life. In some churches, they believe they have a well life because they're nice Christians. You don't because you're a sinner. Some churches are like that. Sometimes they don't speak about it. Sometimes they do. So again, we're told about people in sheep's clothing that are actually ravenous wolves. But that's not just some corrupt guy that manipulates a lay person or abuses the trust in the church in some other way. Because there's an internal world where they can will things and manipulate people to cause sin while saying people shouldn't sin. Causing somebody's life to be cursed. Because, they're cursed because they're sinners. Or they're having a cursed life because they're sinners. So again, Jesus stripped the world of that religious dogma. Hey, you with the first stone, throw the first stone. When you can say you're without sin. So eventually we get to the point, but if you're saved, you're going to be without sin, and then we can throw stones at you. Because now there's a new law. I know what the Bible says, but you have to read it all. The Bible's an ink blot. You're going to be drawn to certain parts of it, and then the spirits know who you are. If Paul's walking around you today, you may be drawn to a certain thing that Paul said without understanding what it means, or understanding what it means and not being drawn to the balancing scripture. Because if you watch Paul, he seems to bounce all over the place, doesn't he? Because he saw what people were doing with what he said. And he said, well, I got to fix that by saying this now to balance. So when we get to the end of all of what it does and what it says, and this occurs in the Old Testament also, but if we get to the New Testament, we get back to the idea that don't throw stones, don't offend others, and they simply have to believe. The work that Jesus did was touch base and go. Touch base and go. Touch base and go. Touch base and go. That's what Jesus did in his life. When his real ministry began, he was moving and grooving. He didn't stop at the beginning of church. He said, okay, you go and tell everyone else about this, Mr. Demoniac that's healed now. So they can believe. You tell them about the Son of Man. You tell them that my Father sent me to do this. They should believe in God and be converted. Now, how does conversion take place? God. What does God have to do to convert you? Use up a certain level of power. Because God is all powerful, but why doesn't God move upon the earth with all that power? Because the opening is not. And it isn't necessarily one person. Remember, Jesus was crucified. You have to be careful what you say, because what you're all doing is causing that crucifixion to take Jesus down, because he didn't have a good life. The disciples were stoned and beaten up. They didn't have a good life because they were sinners, right? Because they told you become a vegetarian if somebody wants to be a vegetarian for the gospel. But you don't believe in that. But you don't have to believe in that to be saved, but you can't cause somebody to fall with intention of writing that person off. But Jesus believes they're all valuable. But there is the sin unto death. And that's not generally a lay person's sin. And I mean that in a different way. When you're in a church and you're a law enforcement officer, you're generally not a lay person anymore. People consider you somebody within a church with authority. It happens. So again, it's somebody that's in the pew without position in government, without a powerful life. Because you can have position within a community and not have a government position. Again, a high place. Not people of high places. And even if a person has money, it doesn't mean they're a high place if they're not influencing others, influential in some manner. So again, there is status outside of what we physically would consider status. So the sin unto death, if you're just a general Joe, if you are a person that is covered in Isaiah and Ezekiel as being more innocent than those that are causing issue or not healing, people that are in a better life, people that are in a more fortunate life. If you're not there, if you're struggling against something, I mean, it isn't always money. And again, this is why God has to judge things, but I can help you understand some of the factors that God takes into consideration, because even if it's a factor that God takes into consideration, I don't know the answer to that factor. Only God does. God knows what caused each thing. I mean, God has shown me how it all fits together, how one thing affects another, and before you know it, somebody's fallen based upon those that say the person shouldn't fall. Moving the evil eye, moving the psychological warfare, moving psychological torture until they go in the wrong direction. So again, that's what's called an illusion is out. They have an illusion going on. But God has showed me how to calculate that illusion. A lot of times you'll hear me say you and things like that. I don't know who they are. But But I'll tell you, some of them are in law enforcement, some of them are intelligence, some are in private sector. I've seen some around me. And somebody sitting in the control center looked around and said, they're around me right now. Now you're in trouble and they're going to try to take you out. Yeah, people on the other side that are honest send me inside messages. The other side being somebody listening. So again, we might be at that point in law enforcement where people are beginning to move forward. I've asked you for years to stop the deep state activity so we can get forward to this stuff. And what you'll find is people are extorted into the deep state a lot. So that's not a good thing. Which means they're afraid of the deep state. But in law enforcement, people make mistakes. And we know that. And as long as you have good leaders, that mistakes will be covered. But what's happening is now the mistakes are calculated to cause an increase in real communism. Communism that some people speak about isn't real. The problem with no government system is corrupt. It'll all work if people were good people. Jesus could run a communist community and have it work. Jesus could run a socialist community and have it work unless what? Unless all the Judases come in and try to work for him. So again, there's issues everywhere. So essentially a free enterprise system is the best, but just because you're conservative doesn't mean you believe in free enterprise. A lot of conservatives believe in a lockout system where enterprise is only given to those that accept the conservative mark. And within that conservative mark, their kind of conservative mark, which has become this idea where you have to come against and harm who they tell you to come against and harm, which is against every biblical truth. Well, that's some food for thought. Hopefully we're moving forward of the need for law enforcement officers to receive a plague. You hold the keys to that. Believe and you shall be saved. Repent and you shall be saved. Well, praise God in all that you do. Don't act out violently. Let God take any vengeance that's necessary because God knows where and when it needs to be taken. Praise God.
You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.